Good morning, everyone. This is Bernd Christian Giels coming to you once again from beautiful Cape Cod. Today is Thursday, July 9th, and this is episode 16 on my YouTube channel. For those of you who had the pleasure of watching last night, I am recording basically from the same location. Thankfully, the mosquitoes seem to all be elsewhere right now, so I am hoping and trusting and praying that I will not be swarmed by mosquitoes like I was last night when they came out to celebrate me speaking about Stephen King by landing on my body and attempting to suck my blood. So, today in episode 16, I'm going to be speaking about yet another angle of the current COVID-19 pandemic. And as will become clear as time goes on, I will continue to be speaking about this pandemic throughout my content in future days and weeks, and most likely even months. And the reason that I'm going to be doing that is because the pandemic is not only a serious public health crisis, but it is also something that, in speaking about it, fulfills the purpose of my channel, which is to inspire, educate, and entertain my viewership. So, like I just alluded to, there are many aspects to the pandemic that are receiving attention in the press and the media. But as so often happens, there are also other angles to the pandemic that sometimes don't get quite the attention that they deserve or that they merit. Now, one of the things that has been observed that I have seen noted in much of the mainstream media coverage is the fact that this pandemic has disproportionately harmed, sickened, and killed people of color and other minority groups throughout the country. You can find statistics on this now that enough data has been gathered about the demographics of the people who are becoming sick with the virus and even dying. You can see in those numbers that people of color are disproportionately suffering from this pandemic. Also, what has started to happen more recently, as has been noted in the media, is a trend towards seeing more and more younger people contracting the virus and some people even dying of it. A recent story that I happened to catch that was very sad was that actor Nick Cordero, who was a very well-respected and beloved actor involved in Broadway, as I understand, he recently passed away at the age of only 41 after contracting the virus and battling with it for about 95 days. Folks, that is 3 months of life, 95 days basically. That is a very long time to have to wage a battle with something of this magnitude. And yet, at the same time, it does pale in comparison to the years and years and years that some people fight certain health problems. And on that good note, that very suitable segue, I'm going to now introduce today's topic, which is how the pandemic can be, obviously, of special concern to those who are living with immunosuppressive health conditions or disorders. I was led to think about this issue partly because of one of the last epidemics we had in this country and how it impacted Americans and the particular communities that it most drastically impacted. And on that note, because I am wading into the subject, I am going to acknowledge something that probably some of my viewers have already guessed based on the first 15 videos. Yes, in fact, I am gay. I am a gay man, and I have been open about my sexuality since I was 23 years old. So, in the 1980s, as many older gay men remember, there was a horrific pandemic or epidemic that began in the United States of America. It was first so commonly associated with the gay community that the syndrome or collection of symptoms and problems was collectively known as GRID, which I understand was gay-related infectious disease. So when the HIV epidemic began in this country, it was first associated almost exclusively with the LGBT community. And because it was associated with the LGBT community, there was a great deal of prejudice and hatred and misplaced anger and cruelty waged against the LGBT community. So, on top of the trauma of having many people in my community, the LGBT community, on top of the trauma of people getting sick, becoming deeply sick, and even dying, you had the additional levels of trauma of people being alienated from their families, having no family, no blood relations who would speak to them, even in their time of need, and in the worst case scenarios, having family members, parents, and siblings not even being willing to have anything to do with their relative when that person died from AIDS, which arises in not all people, but in a number of people due to HIV infection. So, because of this past pandemic, which began almost 40 years ago now, I have long been well aware of the fact that people with immunosuppressive conditions, people who have compromised immune systems, can be especially vulnerable to things like the coronavirus pandemic. And so, in reflecting on what has been happening in this country in the last 120 days or so, I felt it was very important to produce an episode focused specifically on those with immunosuppressive conditions. So you might be surprised to learn that actually there wasn't really very good tracking of the number of people with immunosuppressive conditions in this country recently. I have not delved personally into the research that tries to explain why it is that the data on the number of people was not very well defined or regularly collected. I would wager a somewhat educated guess that the number of people with immunosuppressive conditions was probably not better monitored due to a combination of factors. One is the classic scarce resources concern, namely when organizations or institutions have only so much human power, only so much financial power, only so much intellectual power to deal with the many aspects of their day-to-day operations that fall under the mission of their organization. So whether it's hospitals or government-funded research, I would wager a guess that this population of people was not more closely followed because the resources to do so weren't in place. And on a related note, as sadly too often happens, real change in the world sometimes doesn't happen until marginalized communities find enough representation in our government on all levels, local, state, and federal government. Marginalized people sometimes don't get the kind of attention they need until they demand attention by moving forward, moving up in local, state, and federal government institutions to offer a voice on behalf of these communities. And you can see this in many places. You can see that this has been true for the disability community here in the United States of America. You can see this also with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. You can see it in the current day as many people who are from communities who fought for civil rights in the 1960s are now actively, vocally, and forcefully protesting the issue of police misconduct and brutality in this country. So, immunosuppressive conditions can arise in response to a number of factors, and I will get to those details in a moment. But first, what is the exact number of people in the United States of America who have immunosuppressive conditions? Like I said, it's challenging to get good data. The data that I did find came from simply starting a search by putting Demographics of Immunosuppressive Disorders American Citizens as a phrase into Google and seeing what I got. Now, there was an interesting article that I found, and I will post the link to that article in the box in this page of my YouTube channel where I describe what this episode is about. The article that I am referencing was from 2015, so it's not very recent, but it's not extremely old either. And in this article, written by Theo Schall, a number of very salient points are made about the immunosuppressive conditions and disorders that community of people have. So, based on a 2002 paper noted in this article, researchers estimated approximately 10 million American citizens were immunocompromised. A 2016 article suggested that it was approximately 4% of adults in the United States had reported being told by a physician that they were in fact immunocompromised. Now, in the current situation in America in the year 2020, the United States population is, as I understand, approximately 330 million people. So, if you take 4% of that, you get about 13 million people. So, consider that. 13 million American citizens living day to day with immunosuppressive concerns. To put that into context, that is about twice, roughly twice, the population of the New York City metro area. 13 million people is larger than the city of Wuhan, China, which has been in the news as it was the first, as I understand it, major city in the world to become exposed to the coronavirus. As I understand it, Wuhan, China has a population of about 11 million people. So imagine, if you will, a city the size of Wuhan, China, or a city roughly double the size of population of New York City, full of people, all of whom, every single one of them has an immunosuppressive condition or disorder. So that is not a small number. And the reason that we should really think about these individuals, there's actually several reasons. One, these individuals, by virtue of their condition, are highly likely to be, more often contracting the coronavirus than the rest of American citizens who have more functional immune systems. And because of that, they not only suffer in many ways, including often having to socially isolate themselves as a way of protecting themselves against infection out in the world, but they could very easily become carriers of the coronavirus if they are exposed. And then if they do go out in public, they could end up exposing other people to the virus as well. So, sadly, as I said earlier in this video, events like pandemics have a way of revealing the cracks and the fault lines in the functioning of major institutions, in this case, the healthcare system. And this pandemic is no different in that regard. There has been a fair bit of media coverage discussing, as I said, how the pandemic is disproportionately impacting people of color. There has not been, as I've seen, as much coverage given to the 13 million or so Americans, based on my math, living in this country today who have immunosuppressive concerns and therefore, due to the pandemic, are in all likelihood living very, very limited, restricted lives as a precaution to save themselves from the risk of getting sick and dying all over the country. So, now that I've answered the question about the number of people who have immunosuppressive concerns, I'm going to switch to the next section of my discussion, which is talking about the immune system itself. The immune system is a fascinating part of the human body, of the human anatomy. Now, I have not taken any courses in immunology. It's yet another subject I find fascinating that I would love to research more, but there are only 24 hours in a day, and there are other topics that I would like to research more first. However, what I do know from what I've read is that the immune system can be impacted by an immune disorder either through one of two ways. You can either be born with an immune system disorder or you can acquire one. Now, I don't have the data in front of me on the percentage of people who have immunosuppressive concerns who were born with them versus those who acquired them. However, what I can tell you is that the immune system is impacted by any number of factors that then will impact its quality of function. One major issue that impacts the immune system is cancer and cancer treatment. Chemotherapy, while effective for many people, can be devastating to the human immune system. So people who have cancer and or people who have cancer and who are undergoing chemotherapy can experience suppressed immune system function in their body. And this is not surprising when you consider what chemotherapy is. Chemotherapy is a process where cells in your body are irradiated with radiation to kill the cells that constitute the cancer in the human body. So radiation, it makes perfect sense that this would be the case, that the immune system would have to work pretty hard, would be kind of almost like under a sense of feeling assaulted or burdened when the body is irradiated. Because think about when you go out in the summertime and you go out without sunblock and it's a broiling hot day, there's not a cloud in the sky, and you spend too much time out in the sun with no sunblock. What happens to your skin? Usually not something very good. And that's just from being out in the sun. So it is no surprise then that chemotherapy can reduce the functioning of the immune system in the human body. Another thing that can happen is that people sometimes have to take different drugs that create an immunosuppressive condition in their body as a way of treating an existing health issue other than cancer. One particular concern is transplant patients. So when people receive organ transplants, sometimes what happens is the body of the person receiving the transplant rejects the new organ that has been implanted. And so as a way of combating this problem, sometimes patients are given drugs to counteract the immune system of the human body responding to this organ transplant. So not only do cancer patients have potential issues with their immune system function, but also people who have received organ transplants can have issues with their immune system function. Now, one of the most frightening pieces of data that I found in the time I was researching this, which was only about 2 or 3 hours, is the factor of malnutrition. Now, anyone who's alive knows from personal experience what it feels like if you skip a meal or you're unable to get enough calories for the day because maybe your day was so busy that you ran out of time to have lunch. And then by the evening, you are maybe suffering from the jitters because your blood sugar has gone way down. That can happen to me. If I don't eat enough in a day, I know when I haven't because I'll get a little bit of jitters. One moment while a plane comes by. On that note, I will tell you that the planes fly so low where I live now that I can almost literally read anything written on the underbelly of the planes. I would say they are about 600 feet above me. Maybe not that much when they fly by. So that is why they are so loud. I can almost literally wave at the people in the planes. So, back to my topic, malnutrition. Malnutrition and hunger is a major problem throughout the world, and sadly is a problem even here in the United States of America, one of the most wealthy, long abiding civilizations, countries in our current era. The United States has been around since 1776. And even now, 240 plus some years later, we fight every day the issue of hunger in America and the related issue of malnutrition. So, nutrition is a critical factor in helping us maintain healthy immune systems. And on a related note, from what I read, it follows that if people as children don't experience sufficiently robust nutrition as part of their development, they will more likely have issues with their immune system development and functioning later. That's what this piece of data suggests, is that malnutrition can harm your immune system development as well as its functioning. And from what I saw, it appears that this can be a problem at most any age. I mean, think about it. If you go on a starvation diet at any age and you drastically reduce your caloric intake and out of a desire to lose weight, and you put your body through the stress of a radically different diet that does not meet your daily caloric needs, you're stressing your body unnecessarily is what you are doing. And therefore, why wouldn't your immune system, as well as the other systems in your body, experience a degradation in their functioning? It makes perfect sense that the immune system, like any other system in the body, would not function as well, be as resilient, be as strong, be as reliable if you're not feeding your body properly. And this has major, major implications, this one piece of data, right? So if hunger and malnutrition are such a major factor in immune system functioning, what do you think it means if you're living in a country where childhood hunger and adult hunger is a serious problem, like it is here in the United States? Another plane. And no matter what millions of Americans might do, they might still struggle to have enough food, even if they have food stamps, even if they have the help of a local food pantry. Hunger and malnutrition is an actual major problem in this country, the United States of America. So, if we want to address this pandemic that's happening now, and if we want to reduce the risk of pandemics happening in the future, it seems to just automatically follow. It's a no-brainer that you have to look at the reality of food and nutrition in the daily lives of your citizenry. And this is true, obviously, no matter where you are, not just here in the United States, any country. So, malnutrition. If you're not eating well, you're not doing your body any favors. And the immune system is just yet another system that shows the reality that, indeed, lack of proper nutrition is a very serious problem. So, another factor that impacts immune system functioning is aging. And when you consider the current status of the pandemic, that a large portion of the people that are dying are people who are dying in nursing homes, it makes sense. From what I have heard, approximately 1 out of every 4 people who have died in the United States of America from the coronavirus pandemic are people living in nursing homes, assisted care facilities, and the like. 1 in 4. And if you consider the fact that the demographics of this country are shifting such that we are going to have a larger proportion of American citizens as elders in the coming years and decades, especially the 2020s and the 2030s, this has serious public health policy implications. If we want to be resilient to future pandemics, and if we want to more successfully contain the current one, we also have to look at how we treat our elders, how they are cared for, where they are cared for. And because our country has a culture of having a lot of our elders living in these types of facilities, you could argue that it places them at perhaps greater risk than if they were able to live at home with their families, where they potentially will have better care and better social connections than they will in facilities in which people caring for them are not their relatives. Now, in no way do I want what I just said to be construed as basically advocating that we get rid of these types of facilities in this country. I am not at all suggesting that. What I am saying is that aging positively correlates with decreased immune system function, and therefore the elderly are at higher risk of really any sort of illness, including the coronavirus pandemic. So as we adopt measures and continue to respond to the current crisis, we need to be mindful of elders and their needs, regardless of if they are in assisted living facilities, long-term care facilities, or living at home in a multi-generational family unit, or living on their own, healthy, happy, and robust into their later years, but still more likely to have a lower functioning immune system. One moment. I am so looking forward to the day when I have a studio where I can record these without all of the noise interference. So, then another group of people are people who have HIV and AIDS. HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus, and AIDS is the syndrome that develops in response to becoming positive, being infected with HIV. So those individuals who have disorders, health conditions in which their body has a virus that it's fighting every single day, imagine your immune system is like an army. And if your army is already fighting one battle, then what do you think is going to happen if it has to fight another battle? It's not going to have the full resources at its disposal to fight a second invader. So if someone already has a situation in which their immune system is actively managing and fighting some virus in the body, adding another one in is just going to add to the burden. So obviously anyone who has a pre-existing medical condition that requires the immune system to fight at a heightened level of energy, then it makes sense that adding more to that burden is going to further stress the immune system. Now, I want to say one last thing about this topic of factors that impact the immune system. And that is that all of these issues are really radically connected, right? So I talked about malnutrition. And sadly, during the current moment in our country, millions of Americans have been laid off from their jobs since mid-March. And a lot of people, thankfully, have had the protection of enhanced unemployment benefits, which sadly are going to expire at the end of July. Pause. That was cool. I actually saw the shadow of the plane go across the house. So, malnutrition, employment, housing, all of these things are connected. So think about all of the millions of Americans who have lost their jobs. Some have been furloughed indefinitely, and maybe they're already looking for a new job because they've given up on the idea that their existing job will ever invite them back. Imagine running out of money and then having to go to a food pantry or having to use food stamps, and then even that not being enough. The bottom line is that a lot more Americans are at risk for hunger and malnutrition now that the economy is in the dire situation that it is. And although the unemployment rate did decline in response to the latest jobs report for the month of June, even though there was a glimmer of hope there, the numbers are likely the best we're going to see for a while. Why? Because the numbers for the month of June were calculated using data that was collected approximately no later than June 12th. Now, if you look at the cases of coronavirus in the states across the United States, many states began their current upward spike in cases relatively shortly right after June 12th. Between June 15th and June 30th, many states saw an increasing expansion in the number of cases. So, at the moment that those numbers were tallied for the June jobs report, it was looking fairly rosy because those spikes were not yet quite in evidence. And so people were probably feeling more optimistic than they are feeling now. So, despite the fact that we had an improvement in the economy, it seems fairly likely that the next report will be much more sobering and that persistent heightened levels of unemployment will be with us for a while. And because of that, the stress of being unemployed, the stress of having limited financial resources, the stress of not being able to eat well, will place a burden upon us and our immune systems at a time that is the worst time for that to happen. If you're not able to eat well, if you cannot secure the amount of calories you need every day to sustain your body at the level that you need, you're going to experience more stress placed upon your system. It is psychologically, emotionally, and physically draining for so many people to fight and fight and fight for the most basic things like having food to ensure that they don't starve. So, in closing, what I want to share as the main takeaway I ask you to take from this video is that the immune system and human health and wellness are intricately connected to so many other things, including nutrition, including employment, including how we treat one another, namely our social norms, how we socialize out in public. And so if there's anything I would like you to take from this is the realization that many people in this country and abroad already have significant challenges to face. And those with immunosuppressive conditions are one of those groups of people. So when you're going out and about in your daily life and you are doing whatever it is you need to do, going to the grocery store, going to the cleaners, spending time with family members with appropriate precautions, keep in mind that there are many Americans out there who are less fortunate and find daily living challenging enough even before the pandemic began. And so my invitation is that we all be more mindful and thoughtful about our fellow American citizens and their needs and their challenges and their hopes and their dreams, because it is true to say we are all in this together. Whether we recognize it or not, that is the truth. We are all in this together. And on that note, I'm going to close. Thank you very much again for watching my episode today. I might record another one today as it's still early. So have a great day. And on the note of the plane flying by again, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.